Osaka is the heart of Japanese Pokemon cards, and Nipponbashi is the district to visit, packed top to bottom with Pokemon card stores. So on this trip, I went to over 25 of them to work out which card shops in Osaka are the best. I'm going to be measuring each store by 2 metrics. Variety, so whether they focus on modern cards from recent sets, or if they have a vintage selection too. The more eras of cards a store covers, the better. And prices. If a store has tons of cards but they're overpriced, that's a paddling. But if I can find bangers for cheap, well, that's the dream. So basically, do they have cool stuff and can I afford it? I'm big on artist collections. Last year, I boosted my Koki Saito binders significantly. So I really want to build on that this time around for artists like Hajime Kusujima, Kagemaru Himeno, and Tomokazu Komiya, all absolute legends. Rather than walk around aimlessly in Nipponbashi, it's best to go from bottom to top. The bottom is pretty sparse with few stores, but one well worth checking out. So when you're done, you can head back to the much denser core where you'll spend most of your time. First up is Support Chance Osaka Nipponbashi. This store has a big focus on high-end items like PSA slabs and sealed product, but what they're stocking is incredibly cool. They have a wall in the corner of the store dedicated to some of the rarest Japanese slabs in existence, and they even have the population report right next to them. This Mega Sachiko EX is probably the rarest in the store with only 23 graded as a PSA 10. They had a bunch of promos here too, everything ranging from Pokemon Center promos to Worlds promo packs, and there was no shortage of Pikachu promos. They had sealed cases of base set starter decks selling for 10,000 each. Probably the craziest thing in the store was this PSA 10 Illusion Zoroark. This is a promo all the way back from 2010, and this particular Zoroark was illustrated by a second grader named Kosuke Mori. Yeah, this was really cool, but at $10,000, it's just a little bit out of my price range. Apart from all these one-off high-ticket items, they mostly stocked modern PSA slabs, stuff like V-Star Universe, Character Rares, SARs, all the really popular stuff from the last couple of years. There's this weird trend in Japan where PSA 9 cards are worth a little bit less than raw cards occasionally. So this was the kind of store where you may find a bargain like that, where you can buy a slab, it's cheaper than the raw, you can crack it and put in your binder. I feel like the HeartGold SoulSilver graded cards were pretty fairly priced, although I didn't get the best shot of them, which is kind of annoying. They had a decent amount of sealed products too, though this was all filmed before the reprint. And even then, it still felt really, really expensive. So I don't think I would have bought sealed product in here if I was looking for it. Overall, card shop support chance is definitely worth checking out for the high-end items alone. I'm gonna give it 3 stars for variety. There's some nice items, but they're quite sparse. And 4 stars for price, mainly because I picked up this VS Suicune for just $30, and it was in perfect condition too. Heading back towards the next big store are 3 little ones. Card Collect, which was practically empty and felt like a front for another operation. Card Gorilla, a small store with mostly modern cards. And Card Shop Allium, which has a 151 Master Ball set framed on the wall, which was pretty cool, and I think that's worth checking out. This brings us back to Otaku Road, the center of Nipponbashi card stores, and to C-Labo Osaka Nipponbashi Level 5. Absolute mouthful. C-Labo has 3 locations in Nipponbashi, but this one is by far the most fun. The sheer variety and amount of cards across so many different eras makes this one of the best stores to not only browse, but slowly piece together parts of your collection. Everything from base set through to the GBA era, Diamond Pearl Platinum, HeartGold SoulSilver. If there's a card you're chasing down, chances are it's in here. They've even got some no rarity cards, which are generally pretty hard to come by. As you can probably tell, most of the cards here have yellow stickers on them, and this means they've got some form of damage, which is kind of to be expected for cards this old, but the prices are marked down because of that, so it tends to balance out. I found though that you can get really caught up in inspecting yellow sticker cards, so it becomes a bit of a time management exercise. Especially for a store like C-Labo, it's hard to work out what to buy with so many cards jumping out at you. So if you do visit here, I'd recommend allowing enough time in your day for it. They had a really, really nice selection of E-Series and web cards when I was there, as well as some black and white EX secret rares, which can be kind of hard to come by. Their modern range isn't as deep as other stores, which will make sense in a minute, but to be honest, I don't think you're really visiting this store for modern cards anyway. During this visit, they had a lot of HeartGold and SoulSilver era cards. These became increasingly harder to find as the trip went on, and honestly, the prices were fairly reasonable. Because this was the first store on the trip, I actually didn't pick up anything in case I found stuff cheaper along the way. I still give it a 4 for prices and an easy 5 stars for variety, making it an absolute must visit. When you're done here, you can visit the second C-Labo at street level. Filming wasn't allowed at this store, but that didn't really matter because for C-Labo standards, cards are notoriously overpriced here, potentially because it's at street level and targeting tourists. Either way, it's still worth checking out on your way to the next stop, Magi, Osaka, Nipponbashi. Heading in here, I was expecting the worst, because during the 2023 boom, Magi were constantly pumping the prices of cards online, so they built a reputation of being overpriced. The reality could not be further from the truth. Almost everything was fairly priced, from modern all the way through to vintage. And this Magi is one of those stores that has almost everything. Definitely one of the bigger ranges, spanning multiple cabinets deep. This VS Umbreon for $123 was crazy. Even though it was damaged, it still seemed like a decent binder copy. There were some stunning crystal cards from Split Earth and Mysterious Mountains, as well as some E-Series, which are always just so fun to look at. They had an awesome selection of base set cards too, with prices varying depending on popularity and condition. This Touch Generation by Komiya was a card I only saw twice over 9 days. And I'm so salty I didn't notice it until I was editing this video because I needed it for my Komiya binder. One thing I really liked though was how many EX and Delta species cards they had. It was the generation where I basically stopped looking at Pokemon cards, so seeing them all laid out always gives me this sense of FOMO and regret. I really got to hold myself back whenever I see them. This Magi has a massive PSA range too, so depending on when you visit, you can potentially find some crazy deals. Like I said, PSA 9 cards are kinda on clearance, and this Magi has a lot of them, so worth checking out for that alone. There was a solid sealed collection here too, though I'd kinda skip on anything Scarlet Violet. If you're missing any Sword and Shield sets though, chances are you'd find them in here. Just don't expect to pay less than market price. Unlike the previous stores we'd visited, there was a massive amount of modern cards for sale here. From Sun and Moon through to Scarlet and Violet, everything from trainer cards across multiple generations, alternate arts and gold cards, even rainbow rares. Honestly, this was probably the biggest range of rainbows I saw on the trip. Magi honestly surprised me, and I ended up coming here a few times while I was staying in Osaka. Overall, I'd give it 5 stars for variety and 4 for prices. Fair, but not amazing deals, though I did pick up this Hajime Kusajima Total Dial promo for $19 and this Sneasel by Midori Harada for $12. Both were just too hard to pass up. Right next door to Magi is another gem of a store, Preizu Osaka Nipponbashi Honten. Really long names. At this point, I'm making it sound like every store is based and flawless, but it just so happens that we're starting with bangers. And besides, Osaka is really that good. Preizu especially so because it's tax-free. So if you're a tourist, everything is just that little bit cheaper. And Preizu has a massive range, mostly modern cards, but their fair shake of vintage too. Just don't expect it to be as deep as Magi or C-Labo. Their E-Series range is solid, but it was lacking in terms of rares and holos. They did have a lot of common and uncommon cards, and while they're all between $2 to $3, surprisingly, you can find cards like these for as low as $1 in some stores, so don't go too overboard here. Same thing goes for their old back range. There aren't a whole lot of rares, mostly C and UC cards like potions and computer search, so you can kind of get tripped up here without realizing it. This Preizu has a decent amount of Diamond Pearl Platinum EX and Black and White XY era cards, with prices anywhere from $10 through to $80. No incredible standouts, but a healthy range if you came here with the intent to buy. And there was no shortage of high ticket cards either. This Licia Full Art, which at one point was nearly $4,000, and the Japanese Rainbow Charizard VMAX promo, a tournament exclusive prize in Japan, limited to just 600 total. They even had the Rayquaza VMAX special art, which annoyingly is the only special art I'm missing from my collection. Priced at $1,230, it's way more than the English version. When it came to modern cards, this is where Preizu really shines. They had a huge selection of shiny cards going back to Ultra Shiny GX. And seeing the comparison in price between the Gardevoirs like that was kind of funny. As for more recent sets, there were plenty of special arts and character rares, as well as Master Balls from 151 too. Again, with all the reprints, I expect these to have dropped in price significantly too, so don't be surprised if you're seeing them cheaper now. And if there was a full art trainer you were after, you'd almost definitely find it here, with another massive selection across the last 3 generations. Preizu has a bunch of cards marked as damaged, but don't let that deter you. I've seen damaged cards sold here come back as PSA 10s, which either says something about Preizu or says something about PSA. Either way, it's a solid store, with 3 stars for variety, just because the vintage selection wasn't that deep, and 4 stars for prices. I was able to pick up an Espeon V and Flareon V for $70 each, and this beautiful Hajime Kusajima E-Series muck for $30. Crossing back through the center, you'll see another Preizu, but they focus mainly on one piece and it's pretty small, so if you're strapped for time, you can skip it. Keep heading down this street though, and eventually you'll reach another favorite of mine, C-Labo number Nigotem. This one is really easy to miss, just because it's away from the center of Otaku Road, and I think for that reason, you're more likely to find obscure cards here. They have a healthy collection of vintage old back cards, though it was looking a bit empty this time round, and most if not all cards had yellow stickers on them. And as is standard for C-Labo, there was a nice range of E-Series cards cards too. Not as many holos as previous stores, but a good selection nonetheless, with a fair few promo cards. Perfect if you're trying to complete an artist binder. This store was really stocked up on Modern too, but the prices were unfortunately all over the place. Most notably, the Leafeon and Flareon from Eevee Heroes, which were both priced way beyond the Gem Mint copy I just picked up at Prezoo, despite having a yellow sticker on him. And that seemed to be the case for the other special arts in this cabinet too. This Pokemon Center Lady full art seemed really expensive for a damaged card, $360 compared to $190 on eBay for a PSA 9 copy, and $600 for this Marnie seemed way too much, especially when that could buy you nearly 3 PSA 9s. But then on the other side, you were seeing a bunch of 2000s and 2010s era cards for mostly fair prices. Without inspecting these cards, it's hard to tell if they're good deals or not, and often there just isn't enough time to check every single card. So like I was saying earlier, you gotta be strategic about what you inspect versus the time you have on your trip. C-Labo is really confusing because of all the stores visited so far, this one would have randomly damaged modern cards that were ultra cheap. And they're probably cheaper now too. So this is the type of store where you can very easily find a bargain. You just need to sift through a lot of cards and inspect as many as you can. Fortunately, I did spend a bit of time here and managed to find some excellent binder copies of the Quilava, Bayleaf, and Croconaw Trainer Magazine promos for a total of $30, an absolute steal. Overall, I like this store and I think it's definitely worth checking out. I'd give it 3.5 stars for variety and 3.5 stars for prices too. Worth a visit, but just a bit hard to gauge. With the streets lit up, we realized we hadn't visited Big Magic, one of the more prolific online stores that unfortunately had a disappointing physical location. I wasn't allowed to film in this store, and that was probably for good reason because everything for sale was really, really expensive. So it's worth checking out if you're in the area, but don't expect any amazing deals. Right around the corner though is one of the best stores in Osaka with an entrance that's way too hidden. You need to enter this one from the back, not the main street, and go up an elevator to level 6 until you reach Dragon Star Nipponbashi Nigoten. Japanese Pokemon cards are so back, and this Dragon Star is proof. With one of the biggest ranges of modern cards in Osaka at some of the best prices. Dragon Star was one of the best places to buy Japanese Pokemon cards online from until they blocked international customers. Luckily, their physical store is really good, with prices just as good as their online store. They've got cards from every modern set, covering Scarlet Violet, Sword and Shield through to Sun and Moon. And not just random cards, they're stocking all the heavy hitters, so if there's a special art you're after, this is a great place to pick it up. Especially if you're willing to put in a bit of work. Because where Dragon Star really shines is with yellow sticker cards. They're marked as damage, but most of the yellow stickers I inspected ended up being in great condition. Basically, you end up getting a discount for something minor like centering or a defect that you can't even see. And they've got a lot of yellow sticker cards here too, not just for modern cards, of which there are plenty, but for older cards too. This Dragon Star is the type of store where if you have a lot of time, you can potentially find some really great deals amongst the bulk and damaged cards. You just have to be really committed to the game. I didn't get a chance to look at the Glaceon and the Leafeon here, but they had a massive reduction, and being a modern card, I highly doubt they were really damaged. It was probably just a centering issue. Basically, just because something has a yellow sticker doesn't mean it isn't worth looking at. The vintage selection here wasn't the best. It was mostly just random cards from different generations. And that would make sense after we visited the other Dragon Star in this area. But either way, there were still some nice cards to sift through here. Looking back, I really wish I'd picked up these Kanaka Ale trainer cards from the HeartGold SoulSilver era, just because the illustrations are so unlike any other era of trainer cards and they were so cheap. They also had a massive amount of sealed product too, so with the latest reprints, I'd imagine they'd be pretty stocked up. For variety, I'd give 3 stars, just because there isn't a whole lot of vintage here. For prices though, definitely 5 stars. Dragon Star is one of the best. After 2 years, I finally bought this Gardenia's Vigor for $12, some Corki Saito cards for $7, and a bunch of movie promos for roughly $2 each. While you're still in this area, it's worth checking out the third Prezoo, Prezoo Nambatem. Seeing as the first Prezoo was so good, it makes sense to visit this one too. Now, there's a lot of modern here, covering Sun and Moon through to Scarlet and Violet, and it's mostly the same as the Prezoo on the main street, so don't expect any major disparity in prices. I really mean it when I say there's a focus on modern though. Cabinets full of character rares, a heavy focus on Master Balls from 151, special arts and ultra rares from V-Star Universe. After a while, it all starts just bleeding into one. That's not to say there wasn't any vintage or older cards here. While not as much as the other Prezoo, they definitely had some cards to work through, but the variety was kind of patchy and you were mostly hoping to find something cool by luck. They did have a few HeartGold SoulSilver cards, and those eventually became the toughest type of card to find. So there's no reason to walk past it while you're here. They had a few high-end cards on display, mostly Chase Waifu cards from the past few years, all of which have gotten dramatically cheaper since. And there were a bunch of accessories too, so if you're after like an old deck box, it's worth trying your luck in here. Overall, I give this store 3 stars for variety and 3 stars for prices. Not the worst, not the best, just bang on average. And you know what? Sometimes that's okay. Most card stores here close at about 8 or 9 p.m, except for Bar Unknown, who are usually open till midnight. You can relax, browse some cards, and even play some Pokemon in their very spacious setup, which was just what I needed after that marathon. We ended up covering 15 stores in day 1, and on day 2, we were right back at it. Most card stores don't open till about 11 or 12, so we took a quick train ride to Mandarake in Umeda before the rest of Nipponbashi woke up. Mandarake Umeda is huge. Video games, figures, you name it, it's here. So Pokemon cards are no exception, and Mandarake Umeda has a fairly modest range, almost exclusively stocking vintage cards. Any Mandarake is a go-to for vintage collectors, and while the prices aren't as cheap as they used to be, they're still fairly reasonable. And you never know what you'll find in a Mandarake, which is why they're always worth checking out. This one had a Vending Series sheet for $94. One of the earliest iterations of Pokemon cards that came from a vending machine where you had to peel the cards off a sheet. You could buy some complete Vending Series cards for $172 each, which seemed about standard. They even had some no-rarity cards, though not the most popular ones, for around $125. This Mandarake sorted cards by energy type, so you could see the range of vintage cards spanning from base set through to Neo, occasionally some ADV era, with a few Diamond Pearl Platinum holos too. The condition on these cards is mostly played. Mandarake ranks cards from 1 to 10, and most of the cards on display here was 7. This usually means light play to mint. Now personally, I think anything over 7 is worth checking out, which is why I picked up this Shiftry by Kagemaru Himeno and Magnezone by Masakazu Fukuda for $5 each. For variety, I'd give this Mandarake 3.5 stars. Lots of eras, but not a huge volume. And 3.5 stars for price. Pretty much standard with no crazy deals to be found. Now that we were back in Nipponbashi, it was time to visit some of the more high-class stores, starting with Giraful. Giraful Number is more of a marquee card store. From the moment you walk in, you can tell this is a newer store with a focus on presentation. It's a store that's attractive to tourists, with prices reflective of it too. They've got a huge range of cards from vintage through to modern. Practically every new modern chase card is here. Just in this cabinet alone, you've got Iono, Miriam, Charizards, Serena. There are a bunch of Master Balls from 151 and probably more now too. Sun and Moon chase cards with a really solid variety. Basically everything new is here, with 3 modern eras very extensively covered. Their vintage range is extremely deep. Lots of base set cards in varying conditions, and a bunch of Neo cards too. These are some of the best old back holos, so seeing them all laid out is a sight to behold. I'd say they have almost everything when it comes to some of the very early Japanese sets, so if you're after a particular card, you're probably going to find it here. For anything in between though, the selection is limited without any real focus, so some cards but not a huge range. What they did have was fairly cool though. This Pikachu World Hobby Fair promo for about $17, this beautiful Gardevoir EX for $124, and these insanely rare cards, Crystal Ho for $1,367 and Shining Noctowl for $990. Stores like these always carry a huge PSA range, and Giraful was not messing around with their display pieces. Poncho Pikachus, a VS Umbreon, a Masaki Machoke promo, all in PSA 10. They had an entire shelf dedicated to PSA promo cards, which for some reason, I didn't film properly. Look, you're just gonna have to head there and see it for yourself, okay? Looking back though, the prices for mostly everything were really high. A lot of these cards are super old, but for the condition they were in, I feel like they should have been marked at or sold as yellow cards, so that was a little bit disappointing. To put it clearly, it felt like everything was 10 to 30% more expensive here than it should be. And that could mean an extra $10 or an extra $50. So I think you need to expend all other options before settling on cards here. Which, look, guilty as charged, I did myself, picking up this Politoed by Tomokazu Komiya for $16. I just really wanted it. Giraful is an option if you can't find that card anywhere else. An easy 4 stars for variety, but 2 stars for prices. You can definitely do better in Osaka. Just a short walk down the street and up an elevator to level 2 is a store just as prolific, but arguably way better with its selection, pricing, and condition, Clove. Everything about Clove screams class. The moment you step out of the elevator, you know you're in for a treat. With a cabinet setup rivaled only by Magi, Clove has one of the biggest ranges of vintage cards out of any store in Japan. It's easily in the top 5 when it comes to old back cards. They've got a big range of modern cards too, with complete displays of character rares across every era, and special arts too, dating from Sun and Moon through to Scarlet and Violet. Be warned though, their modern prices are pretty dated on the much higher end of things, but you don't visit Clove for modern, you visit for vintage. And this is where Clove really shines. They've got one of the most comprehensive ranges of old back cards from base set through to Neo, Gym Leader, with a few E-Series and VS cards scattered throughout too. If you're into Vending Series cards, you're almost certain to find them at Clove. And because their layout is so straightforward, based on energy type, and very clearly displayed, finding them is easier than most other stores. The prices on the Vending Series cards are solid too. Generally, you're spending between $1 to $10, with some of the more popular cards by popular artists like Tomokazu Komiya setting you back just a little bit more. Unlike their modern selection, I think the vintage cards are priced very, very fairly. They had the exact same Politoed I just bought, but were selling it for $5 to $10 cheaper than I'd pay, and in arguably better condition too. It really did vary on the card though. This Ampharos by Atsuko Nishida seemed a little pricey at $50, which is about the same as the PSA 9 price. And a lot of the VS cards seemed priced in, like this Blastoise for $32, and the Gyarados for $60. Those were both more expensive than the Holo Suicune I bought at Support Chance the day before. But if you're looking for common, uncommon, or Vending Series cards, you're in luck with a massive range to choose from at very low prices. Clove is one of the best stores to visit if you're trying to build an artist or a Pokédex binder. And even if you don't plan on spending much, it's so cool to just walk through and browse. Stores like these always feel like mini museums. You'd think all these cards would be gone by now, but they're still out there. I spent way too long in Clove picking up this Vending Rhydon for $3 and Delibird for my VS binder for the same price too. Clove gets 4 stars for prices, let down by their modern offerings, and 4 stars for variety, only because they're missing a lot of cards between Gen 3 and Gen 5. Right outside of Clove and up a few stairs is Toraka Champion. Stores like these are always fun to visit because you can tell they hadn't bothered to update their prices for a really long time, but they just didn't care. Based on the range of cards here, it's clear they're catering primarily to players, with a lot of modern cards in the cabinets and a section dedicated to playables. The prices on the modern cards weren't really that interesting, but the older cards they did have, like Sun and Moon Trainers and Special Arts, were kind of crazy. Even though they had yellow stickers on them, they were overpriced way beyond versus what you'd pay online or at another card store. Blue's Exploration for $220 when it sells for about $180 on eBay. Reshiram and Charizard GX Special Art for $250, selling for less than half of that online. And by far the craziest, Shield Marnie for $627. That's more than the PSA 10 price, and it had a yellow sticker on it. This is why you have to do your research. You can unknowingly spend 2023 prices in 2024. This store earns 2 stars for variety and 1 star for prices, just for that Marnie alone. A little further down the road is one of my favorite stores in Osaka, just because it has a huge variety of vintage cards in really nice condition. B Honpo Osaka Honten. Back in 2023, I came to B and instantly fell in love, purely because they have such a huge range of cards on display. I'm skipping straight to the rating because B Honten is an easy 5 stars when it comes to variety. That's mainly because the Advanced, Diamond Pearl Platinum, Black and White, XY era Pokemon cards are rarely seen on store shelves. You've probably noticed it by now. B, however, has a healthy range of all those cards in excellent condition too. We're talking cabinets full of the original EX cards, and not just 1 or 2 of each type. Almost everything with the option of mint condition or lightly played copies, depending on what you're after. LVX cards too. Looking back on it, I can't think of many other stores in Osaka, let alone Japan, that have this many to choose from. With affordable options and multiple copies of cards, it almost feels endless here. And if you're into Delta Species cards, it feels like they've got almost all of them. Naturally, for the rarer cards like the Charizard, you'll be paying a high price, $343. But considering how old these are, it's honestly not too bad. And as usual, I have to hold myself back from blowing my budget on cards like Flareon and Jolteon, both drawn by the legend Corki Saito. They've even got a solid range of XY and Black and White secret rares. Not as deep as the other eras, but still plenty to choose from. And of all the stores I visited, they had the biggest display of HeartGold SoulSilver cards. So many different Prime cards to choose from, and multiple copies of them. Not to mention the stunning Legends cards beautifully laid out. Honestly, it's kind of a sight to behold and worth visiting Osaka for this alone. When it comes to E-Series, there are a lot of cards to choose from here, and B focuses heavily on rares above commons and uncommons. That's not to say they don't have them. I was really tempted by this Charmeleon by Komiya at the tasty price of $4, and they had an entire section of the cabinet dedicated to the cheaper E-Series and VS cards, all priced below $6. Stores like these are dangerous just because there are so many great cards all in the one spot. I was really torn between 2 Atsuko Nishida cards, this Politoed for $55 or this Xatu for $22, both beautiful in their own right. And this Togetic by Kagemaru Himeno for $25 seemed like a steal, but I couldn't decide between their Espeon VS promo at the same price. B has a lot of modern cards too, with a decent amount of mint cards and yellow sticker cards on sale for those chasing bargains. They also have a huge range of sealed products. Just make sure you do your research before committing to buy. Ultimately though, you're visiting B for the vintage cards, which I just couldn't resist walking away with that beautiful Politoed. Seriously, it's just such a good illustration. Like I said, B nails the variety with 5 stars. They were missing base set, but that'll make sense shortly, and earns a solid 4 for prices. Decent with a few choice picks. Back on Otaku Road are 2 stores run by Full Comp. The one on level 4, Full Comp Osaka Nipponbashi 10 level 4, is more of a player's store, while the one on Otaku Road has an okay selection of modern cards. Everything felt really overpriced here, as are most stores on Otaku Road, because that's where most tourists congregate. But across the road was another Dragon Star, with a decent selection of modern and vintage cards with very fair prices. Dragon Star Nipponbashi Honten is the second best Dragon Star in the area. Just like the last one, they've got a bunch of modern cards, with cabinets above cabinets even hanging from the ceiling, filled with playables and character rares. The modern selection is genuinely decent, with a whole lot of Sun and Moon special arts, full art trainers, and even promos like the Mario and Luigi Pikachu. Looking back on it, there was a big focus on full art trainers, though the prices were much higher than the other stores I'd visited so far. And again, that's because this Dragon Star was on the main street, so it was more likely to be targeting tourists. They did have their fair share of special arts though, with some standouts like the Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX by Mitsuhiro Arata. Honestly, a pretty underrated card, selling for $281. The Charizards from Shiny Treasure EX were priced pretty well at the time, but I felt they had room to drop, so I didn't pick any up. The modern selection was really healthy here, mostly because there's just an abundance of the sets with these cards in Japan right now. They had a lot of yellow sticker cards for sale here, arguably more than the previous Dragon Star, across a whole bunch of different eras too. So if you got the time, there's plenty to inspect here, with nothing over $100. They did stock some vintage, though this was the type of store that just had random vintage cards on the shelves, no real focus to them, much like the other Dragon Star on level 6. But that can sometimes work in your favor. What someone else overlooks ends up being a target for you. I actually ended up buying the Clive SAR here for $11. Felt like a decent deal. While this Dragon Star wasn't amazing, it wasn't the worst. I'd give it 3.5 stars for variety and 3.5 stars for prices. Can't say the same for the Dragon Star next door, which honestly felt like an ultra modern trap, which is so crazy because it was right next to the normal store. Worth a look, but nowhere near comparable to the other Dragon Stars. Coming back to the main road of Den Town was a store that looked really new. AMTAF. You can kind of work out which stores have opened up as part of the boom, and this one was one of them. The layout and the interior was super sleek, and there was a huge focus on modern cards with very little in terms of raw vintage cards. This store prides itself on PSA cards, and they had a bunch. Probably the coolest thing here, a Pokekune Master Set, all sequentially graded by PSA, with a few unfortunate 9s in there. There was some sealed product too, but it just felt way too overpriced. And then some really random singles on display, like this Korokoro Mew. Out of all the stores we visited in Osaka, they actually had the cheapest Master Balls. At the time, I'd yet to see any price lower than $8. That gave them a really big boost, earning 3 stars for prices. And with the interesting slabbed cards on display, it was a 3 stars for variety. Where they excel though is with the really friendly staff. They were super nice and excited to have people filming, so it's 5 stars for service. Next stop was the main Mandarake in Nipponbashi. Mandarake number, towering right over Den Town with a massive 6 floors. Right at the top is a very cramped but thoroughly packed cabinet of vintage cards, ranging from base set through to Neo, Gym Heroes, and E-Series. Off the bat, the prices weren't too bad. Blossom for just $6 and Delibird by Komiya for $4. Absolute steals being that cheap. The range continues into ADV and Diamond Pearl Platinum too, with the rarer cards naturally being priced a bit higher. The Diamond Pearl Platinum holos always stole my attention. The art during this era was stunning, and the holos shined beautifully. There was a very shallow selection of XY and Black and White era cards, which tend to be the harder cards to find in good conditions, with prices that you can stomach. And eventually it trails off into a small modern collection, which you aren't exactly coming here for. Being a secondhand store, they did have some accessories for sale too, so if you're after sleeves, they could potentially be here. But generally, if you're visiting Mandarake, it's for vintage cards, and the condition rating between 1 to 10 still stands, so inspect carefully knowing that 7 is usually pretty safe. This Murkrow by Atsuko Nishida was a perfect example for only $9. It ended up being really clean too, even had a swirl on the holo. And I couldn't decide between this Meganium for $15 or the Rapidash for $9, both by Kagamaru Himeno. Ultimately, I went with the Rapidash because it was cheaper, but the Meganium was the better buy. It's from a pretty expensive E-Series starter deck, but you live and you learn. This Mandarake was fun, but not as deep as Umeda, earning it 3 stars for variety and 3.5 stars for price. After seeing so many vintage cards, I decided to finish the night by visiting one of the last vintage hotspots for the area, and one of my favorite stores to just walk around and browse in. B Battle Tower. All those base set cards missing from B Honten? Yeah, they're in B Battle Tower. Situated right near the first B is a second store that caters mostly to players with a decent tournament space on the second floor. But at ground level, you've got a lot of base set and Neo cards at some of the best prices you'll see in Osaka. We're talking 20 cents to $1. If you're building an artist or a Pokedex binder, this is a must visit. And it's not just limited to base set. I picked up a few advanced era cards that I hadn't seen anywhere else. And the Diamond Pearl Platinum collection had some nice pieces in it too. Not to mention the sealed promos of cards like Jigglypuff, Yanmega, and Baniri, which you barely ever see. As is standard for nearly every card store you'll visit in Japan, Modern takes up majority of the display cases, with a fair few yellow sticker cards for sale here. And while I didn't get a chance to inspect the Eevee Heroes cards, I'm sure there were probably bargains at just $50 each. They had a few decent PSA slabs and high tier cards for sale too, like this Town with No Map booster pack for $375, as well as some sealed boxes of more recent sets, all being sold at what was market price. They even had an English Clara milk carton, which is kind of funny. But if you're visiting B Battle Tower, it's for obscure singles you weren't finding anywhere else. They had so many Hajime Kusajima cards for less than $1, this Masakazu Fukuda Arcanine for just $8. They even had Kagemaru Himeno promos, Wobbuffet for $9, and this Smeagol for 50 cents. The prices speak for themselves, earning this B 4.5 stars. And when you combine them with B Honten, it's a 5 stars for variety. With cards being this cheap, I couldn't draw a line, and I ended up picking up a fair few from this store. I cannot get enough of Diamond Pearl Platinum Holos. Combined with the artwork by some of the all-time Pokemon greats, they cannot be beaten. And you'll see they're going to be my weakness in any card store the longer this trip goes on. So until then, make sure to subscribe for the next parts of this series. And if you're after a deep dive into Japanese card stores, you can check out this video. Thanks as always for watching. Peace out.